Behind every headline is a room no one wants to enter. A room lined with photographs, boxed evidence, and stories that stain. Welcome to True Crime Obsession, where we walk the corridor between fact and fear. Lock the doors, kill the lights, and let's open today's file. They called her the Doomsday Mom, a woman once seen as radiant, loving, devoted to her children. And yet, by the end, she stood accused of orchestrating their brutal murders. At her side was Chad Daybell, a man who claimed to see beyond the veil of life and death. Together they would weave an apocalyptic prophecy that ended not with salvation, but with shallow graves in a backyard. This is the story of Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell, a story of love, obsession, and death. Lori Noreen Cox was born in 1973 in California. To her family and friends, she was bright, outgoing, full of life. She grew up in a large Mormon household, where faith and family were central. Lori seemed destined for the picture-perfect life. A loving husband, happy children, the model of a devoted mother. But Lori's personal life was turbulent. At the age of 19, she married her high school sweetheart in 1992. They divorced within 3 years. She married again in 1995 and had a son, Colby. But once again, the picture-perfect life was not so perfect. It ended in divorce within 3 years. By her third marriage, this time to Joseph Ryan, the two would have a daughter together, Tylee. But again, they filed for divorce within 4 years. By the time she married Charles Vallow in 2006, Lori had already endured one broken relationship after another. But Charles, she believed, was different. Charles was dependable, stable. And together they adopted a little boy, JJ, who was Charles's nephew, when his birth parents could no longer care for him. JJ had autism, but with Charles and Lori, he was enveloped in love. Charles referred to JJ as his best buddy. Lori would describe him as her sunshine. But Lori's devotion was about to shift from her family to something far more dangerous. Hundreds of miles away, Chad Guy Daybell was living a quiet life in Rexburg, Idaho. Born in 1968 to a Mormon family in Utah, he completed high school and continued his studies at BYU. He would stop midway and pursue his dream of becoming a missionary, which took 2 years. He then resumed his studies and graduated from BYU with a BA in journalism. He then married Tammy Douglas in 1990. They two would go on to have 5 children together. Life was great, or so it seemed. Chad would work as a copy editor for a local newspaper, but to make ends meet, he would also work as a cemetery sexton, digging graves. But he claimed he had visions of the afterlife. He became an author and began writing books, dozens of them, weaving tales of near-death experiences, prophecy, and apocalypse. By 2004, Chad and his wife Tammy would start their own publishing company called Spring Creek Book Company, which he used to self-publish his beliefs regarding the end times, as well as other religion-themed books aimed at a Mormon audience. But by the late 2000s, the Daybells would face financial problems. At that time, Chad's publishing business provided an annual income of approximately $2,000. The couple would both have to take part-time jobs to care for their large family. Chad's teachings grew bolder. He said some people were surrounded by dark spirits, zombies, shells of their former selves. Others were of the light, chosen to survive the coming end times. Chad declared himself a prophet of God, destined to gather the 144,000 believers for the second coming. In 2015, Chad claimed he heard the voice telling him to relocate to Rexburg, Idaho. He and Tammy moved there from Springville that June. Chad's popularity grew, and by late 2018, he had a podcast that attracted many radical-thinking people, including Lori Vallow. In October 2018, Lori and a couple of her friends attended a conference called Preparing a People. That's where she encountered Chad Daybell for the first time. For Lori, it was like destiny had arrived. She believed Chad when he said they had been married in multiple past lives, that she was a goddess, that together they were chosen to lead. But the problem was that Chad was married and Lori was also married. But soon, their obsession with each other and with their apocalyptic mission would eclipse everything else, including their spouses and their children. Charles would frequently go on business trips out of town. This allowed Lori to host small overnight gatherings at her home with like-minded friends and Chad Daybell to be in attendance. Charles Vallow noticed the change first. His once loving wife now claimed he had been taken over by a dark spirit named Ned. She told him he was no longer Charles, that he was already dead. Terrified, Charles went to police. He begged for help. But his warnings went unheeded. To authorities, it sounded like the rantings of a bitter husband. To Charles, it was a death sentence. By February of 2019, Lori would tell Charles that she no longer cared for him or JJ. Charles would file for divorce shortly afterwards, citing that he feared for his life and theft of his truck and $35,000 from a joint account. Charles wanted to try to work things out with Lori, but Lori's action would incite fear within Charles. Once again, he believed that Lori was plotting his death. On July 11, 2019, Charles Vallow arrived at Lori's house to pick up JJ. Minutes later, Lori's brother Alex Cox and Charles would have a physical altercation, ending with Alex shooting Charles and unaliving him. Lori told neighbors it was self-defense. Tylee would say that she grabbed a bat after overhearing the argument, but Charles took the bat away. Charles then hit Alex on the head with the bat, causing Alex to go to his truck to retrieve his gun. But neighbors didn't quite believe this. They noticed that Lori was smiling, and later that day, she threw a pool party, with Charles now out of the way. Lori would move her and the kids to Rexburg, Idaho, to be close to Chad. 2 months later, on September 8, 2019, Lori, Alex, and the children visited Yellowstone. It was the last time anyone saw 16-year-old Tylee Ryan alive. She was never enrolled in the local school, and Lori stated she was attending BYU, Idaho. Days later, on September 20th, was the last day JJ attended Rexburg Elementary School. Lori claimed JJ was acting out, so his uncle Alex took him to a friend's house, but no one could find him. And then, Chad's wife, Tammy. On October 19, 2019, Tammy reported being shot at by a masked man with a paintball gun. 10 days later, she was found dead in her sleep. She was healthy, but Chad claimed that she had a terrible cough the night she died, only 49 years old. Chad refused an autopsy. Chad had the funeral planned in 3 days and did not appear to be devastated or saddened at all. Onlookers would say he seemed very businesslike. However, shortly after the service, Chad would file to collect on the nearly $500,000 life insurance policy that Tammy had. 10 days later, Lori and Chad were married on a Hawaiian beach. While family mourned Tammy, Lori and Chad were smiling in the sun, exchanging vows. Behind their vows lay 3 bodies. By November 2019, alarm bells were ringing. JJ and Tylee were missing. Relatives called police. Authorities demanded Lori produce the children. She told police that JJ was in Arizona with a friend of hers. However, when contacted, Lori's friend said she had not seen JJ in several months. Lori smiled, deflected, and lied. When asked where they were, she said, "You wouldn't understand." The world began to watch. Friends, family, and strangers all asked the same question. Where are the children? But that would only be the start of their trouble. As Lori and Chad moved from Idaho to Kauai, Chad's wife Tammy's body was exhumed, an autopsy to determine cause of death. It was found that Tammy had died of asphyxiation. This puts even more heat on the newly married couple. Lori's younger brother Alex, the one who shot and killed Lori's husband Charles Vallow, died December 12, 2019. It was determined his death was caused by high blood pressure and blood clots. On March 5th, she was extradited back to Idaho. She was charged with 2 felonies for abandoning her children and 3 misdemeanors connected to the kids' disappearance. June 9, 2020. Police executed a search warrant on Chad Daybell's property. Behind a red barn, the earth was disturbed. Detectives dug. And then the horror. J.J. Vallow, just 7 years old, was bound in duct tape, buried in a shallow grave near a pond on the property. Tylee Ryan remains were located in an area the Daybell family called the Pet Cemetery, as it had been used to bury their cats and dogs. She was just 16 years old. Her body burned, dismembered, scattered. The children Lori claimed were safe were gone. Their lives were stolen. Their innocence was destroyed. The self-proclaimed prophet's backyard had become their final resting place. Lori and Chad would both be arrested and charged with conspiracy to commit first-degree murder of the death of Tylee, JJ, and Tammy, as well as grand theft by deception. Lori would also get an additional grand theft charge for continuing to receive the children's Social Security survivor benefits after the death of the children, and conspiracy to commit first-degree murder of the death of Charles Vallow. Chad would face insurance fraud related to Tammy's insurance policy. In 2022, Lori was indicted by a grand jury on 1 count of first-degree premeditated murder related to claims that she conspired with her brother to kill Brandon Boudreaux. This incident would occur on October 2, 2019, after Brandon was shot at while driving home in Gilbert, Arizona. It is believed that someone used Tylee Ryan's Jeep as it was seen driving away from the scene afterward. Brandon and Lori's niece Melanie had separated and had filed for divorce from Brandon. Brandon did not support Lori's and Chad's doomsday cult, but his wife Melanie did. In 2023, Lori Vallow faced justice. Prosecutors revealed chilling details. Lori called her own children zombies. She said they had to be removed for God's plan. Jurors heard of her laughter, her indifference, her devotion to Chad above all else. She was found guilty on all counts. Her sentence: 3 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. In 2024, it was Chad's turn. His writings, his prophecies, his manipulations, all laid bare. Although 2 of Chad's children supported him and testified in his defense, the jury saw through his lies. Chad Daybell was sentenced to death on June 1, 2024. But that's not the end. Lori faced 2 conspiracy charges in Arizona for the death of Charles Vallow and the attempted unaliving of Brandon Boudreaux. Her trial in Arizona would be delayed several times, but ultimately on December 5, 2024, hearing, Lori was deemed mentally fit and competent to stand trial and requested to represent herself. This request was granted, and the cases would have separate trials. Lori did not call any witnesses in her defense, but was seen aggressively interrogating women that Charles had dated. Lori maintained that Charles was killed in self-defense, but the jury saw right through that, and Lori was found guilty. On June 12th, Lori was found guilty of conspiring to murder Brandon Boudreaux. After the jury had deliberated for less than 30 minutes, the case of Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell remains one of the darkest in modern history. It is a cautionary tale about faith twisted into fanaticism, about love turned into obsession, about children who should have been protected, but were betrayed. Charles, Tammy, JJ, and Tylee should be alive today. Instead, their smiles remain only in photographs, their voices only in memory. So, what do you think? Was Lori Vallow truly brainwashed by Chad Daybell's apocalyptic visions? Or was she the one pulling the strings all along? Was this the story of a false prophet leading his follower astray? Or 2 killers finding each other at the worst possible time? Let us know what you believe in the comments below. That's case closed. Well, at least on paper. Let us know your thoughts about this story. Was the punishment fitting for the crime committed, or should it have been more severe? If you have a story suggestion, leave it below in the comments. Before you go, don't forget to like the video and share it with someone who is obsessed with true crime, like we are, and check out the rest of the channel while you're at it. Make sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss a story. Until then, stay obsessed.